And he said the churchmen had come to George Washington and had given him a series of written, this is when Washington was president, and Jefferson was Secretary of State, and had given them a series of questions and that would reveal whether or not he was a Christian. And he said the old fox was too cunning for them. He managed to answer every question without ever giving a direct answer. Interesting. You know, it's not something you're going to find in the Texas school books, but so I said, you know, my original goal, I got so wrapped up in this and so into it and so inside Jefferson's head that, you know, about 3 books into this 20-book set, I just decided I'm going to write a book that is like the story of Thomas Jefferson's America. You know, his ideas of the founding of this country. He was in the Virginia House of Burgesses in 1769 or 1770. He was one of the, if not the youngest ever elected member of the Virginia legislature. And he proposed a law that would outlaw slavery within 10 years in Virginia. He was a slaveholder. He proposed a law that would outlaw slavery. To punish him, his peers in the state of Virginia passed a law to punish him for simply putting this forward. Passed a law that said that if any person in Virginia freed their slaves, those slaves could be immediately captured by the state of Virginia, sold at auction, and at first they'd be subject to 2 years of hard labor. I mean, it was like every effort he made in any kind of progressive direction. You know, he's the author of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. And in fact, on his tombstone, he specified that he only wanted 3 things to be on his tombstone. And this was after he was president. In fact, I just yesterday printed out his handwritten note on this, on what he wanted on his tombstone. And he didn't want the fact that he'd been president of the United States, or that he'd been vice president of the United States under John Adams, or that he served as our envoy to France during the time that the Constitution was written, or that he, you know, whatever. He wanted that he was the author of the Declaration of Independence, the author of the Virginia, it's not law, but Virginia something or other of religious freedom, and the founder of the University of Virginia, which was a free school. He believed that every person who was capable of having a good education should be able to get it for free. It was the first free university in the United States. Founded by Jefferson. He was very proud of that. So, one of the things that Jefferson was most concerned about, Jefferson, when the Constitution was being put together, we had the war against the United Kingdom. By 1881, it was pretty much wound up. We had the Articles of Confederation, which basically had 13 colonies that were their own independent states for all practical purposes that would get together about important matters. And it just wasn't working. The Articles of Confederation weren't working. And so they knew that they had to come up with something stronger. And James Madison, who was Jefferson's protege, he's about 20 years younger than Jefferson, as I recall, and was, I mean, these guys were like this. You read the letters between the two of them, and it was like a father-son relationship. And in fact, another funny point that's kind of off topic, but Madison and Jefferson, of course, coined the phrase the separation of church and state, which is why the Texas school board took him out of the textbooks, and literally. And in his correspondence with Madison, he and Madison are talking, now this is before the Constitution was written. He and Madison are talking about, but after we're already a country, about how and why it was important to separate church from state. And Jefferson's fear was that some religious fanatic would end up president, or the religious crazies would take over a branch of Congress, and we'd end up with a theocracy. And Madison wrote back to him saying, oh, you're being hysterical, that'll never happen, people are not that stupid. Now, Jefferson, of course, was a deist. He did not consider himself a, quote, Christian. In fact, he took the New Testament, the first 4 Gospels, and with a knife, with a razor blade, cut out all the miracles of Jesus and reassembled it without any miracles in it at all. And that book is still in print. It's one of the few books that's been continuously in print that's an American book from an American author since the 1700s. It's called the Jefferson Bible. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble. And Jefferson's fear was that religious crazies would take over. Madison's fear was that the government, the reason he wanted a separation between the two was he was afraid that if the government ever started giving money to churches or influencing them in any way, the churches would become corrupted. Because Madison considered himself a Christian. I think he was a Presbyterian, as I recall. And Jefferson didn't. So Madison, in fact, Madison's first veto as president was vetoing a bill that was passed by the legislature and sent to him as president in 1809, it would have been, or maybe 1810. I'm not sure what year it was that he did his first veto, but it was his first veto in office. It was a bill passed by Congress to support poor people in Washington, D.C., which Congress had been doing since the Washington administration. Every year they would have poor houses, and for housing and food and accommodations and medical care and everything. I mean, we started as a welfare state. And the Congress got this bright idea, well, let's give the money to the church, to churches, and let the churches do this. And that was Madison's first veto. He vetoed that. So it's so ironic. You had Jefferson saying, we can't let the religious crazies into government. And Madison saying, oh, that'll never happen. And Madison saying, we can't have government giving money to religious folks because you'll corrupt the churches and you'll end up with billionaire preachers and things. And Jefferson saying, oh, that's crazy, that'll never happen. And here we are. It's like they both happened. They were both prescient and they were both wrong. I mean, it's just incredible. So anyhow, Jefferson was in France as the Constitution was being written. Madison spent 5 years getting ready to write this Constitution. 5 years of study, of very, very, very intensive study on constitutions. He read the Greek Constitution, the Roman Constitution. He read the Iroquois Confederacy's great law. This guy was so focused and so obsessed and so careful and so thoughtful. And he was the official scribe of the Constitution. And he kept all the notes all through the Constitutional Convention, and he kept them secret, in fact, until he died, which was part of the deal that he made with the other members of the Constitutional Convention. And it turns out, and this isn't in my book, but it's in another book, What Would Jefferson Do? It turns out that the reason he kept them secret is because many of those men in that Constitutional Convention were actually betraying their class. They were creating a society that would work to the benefit of average working people rather than an aristocracy, and they didn't want it known by their peers that that's what they were doing. But in any case, Madison puts together the first draft of the Constitution, and he's and this is like a summer's work, a half a year's. It's actually several years' work in aggregate, but the summer of 1787. And he mails it to Jefferson with this long letter about all the work that he's done on this, and what do you think, Dad? Kind of letter, And Jefferson sends him back a note, and I'll just share a little bit of it. He says. Actually, this isn't that note, but it's close. Oh, here it is. Yeah. He said, this is December 20th, 1787. Jefferson wrote to Madison about his concerns. He said bluntly, it was deficient in several areas. First of all, he starts out, James, you did a wonderful job, and I know how hard this has been, and just stroking him and patting him on the, it's very, very nice, very kind of fatherly. And he says, I will now tell you what I do not like. This is a verbatim quote. First, the omission of a Bill of Rights, providing clearly and without the aid of sophism for freedom of religion, freedom of the press, protection against standing armies. He thought we should not have an army at times of peace at all. He was afraid of the rise of military-industrial complex. Restriction of monopolies. He did not think that businesses should become so large that they could dominate sectors. And he was also concerned about the copyright laws. He wanted them shortened. The eternal and unremitting force of the habeas corpus laws, which became incorporated in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th Amendments of the Constitution. And trials by jury, 6th and 7th, in all matters of fact triable by the laws of the land and not by the laws of nations. End quote. He said, let me add that a Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government on earth, general or particular, and what no just government should refuse or rest on inference. And then he wrote and Madison initially was opposed to this because he took the position which, if you read Federalist number 84, you'll find Hamilton taking. In Federalist number 84, Hamilton is arguing very strongly against the Bill of Rights. And Hamilton's point is that if you put a Bill of Rights into the Constitution, future generations may think that the Constitution is conferring rights upon people, and that the only rights it's conferring are these 10 that are listed.